everyone, and welcome to Books in the World. I am here today with Linda Maria Steele, who is a poet and an artist and a writing teacher, and we are going to have some really nice time today reading and talking about poetry. And since it's early spring, I think it's a really good time for this. But before we start, I just wanted to say that Books in the World is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center, which started over 50 years ago. And this TV program was started right here at Cape Cod Community Television 41 years ago. And we are very proud and happy to continue the collecting of artists, writers, poets, and everyone who has something to do with the way books and the printed word. We don't do too much with film, but we do with all kinds of topics relating to publishing and writing. So Linda is a Falmouth resident and has been in a number of places. You are an author, writer, cookbook writer. We're going to talk about all of these things today: writing, art, teaching. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? And then before I forget, we're going to read from Tending the Marsh, your wonderful book of poetry.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, Madeline. So you want me to I live in Falmouth.
Yeah.
So my first book I published in November 2015, Meet Me in My Cape Cod Kitchen, Tending the Marsh, a collection of poetry, was published December 2018. I currently am an adjunct faculty at Dean College, and I also teach a writing class in Falmouth community and Sandwich community called Finding the Writer Within.
Well, when we get to that part, we're going to talk about writing, and maybe you can give some of our listeners some writing tips.
I will, I'll try. Sure. I would be happy to share.
Happy to share. Well, you know, we were talking before, and you mentioned the process of opening up, Finding the Writer Within, which is the name of your course. So I think this might be a good time to jump right into Tending the Marsh, because you have a very interesting story about the way you came to write it. Yeah. But before we do that, let me read one of your author endorsements here from Jamie Cat-Callan, who is the author of Parisian Charm School and a friend of yours, and you were saying a former Cape resident as well. But she has said, reading Tending the Marsh felt as if an angel had silently brushed past me, whispering words of hope and love and joy. The poems are an invitation to open one's eyes and take in all the extraordinary beauty in the natural world.
It's a lovely thing she said.
A lovely thing she says. Yes. Don't you love it? I think it. And I read that probably after I read the poems. And I have to tell you, and I told you this before, that reading this collection is like taking a little journey. And it's a story, it comes through. So tell us about how you came to write it.
Okay, yeah, I loved that you said it was a story, because we hadn't talked about that, and that's sort of what I intended for it, that okay, so the book came to be for a year when I moved into my new house. I decided to, I had just gone through a major life transition, moved into a new house, my daughter and I together, and I could get to the Sippawisset Marsh from my house. So I would walk every day for a year, and I came back to my house and I would sit at my desk and journal. Basically just impressions of what I saw in the marsh and the experience. I've always loved the beach and coming to the Cape since I was a kid, but the marsh, I didn't notice how wonderful and amazing and rewarding and abundant and exciting and natural the marsh is. I didn't realize it was as full as it was. So basically just that process of going to the marsh, taking daily walks, coming home and writing about it was just a process that I went through. But then I sort of put it away, because some friends at the time I was talking to were suggesting that I write a memoir about that year that I went through. And so I actually put that journal entry in the drawer for about a year. But at that same time, I was in transition with work as well. So I decided to pull it out again and said, oh, wonder, what should I do? And then I went to lunch with a friend and I showed it to her and I said, do you think this should be a memoir? And she said, I think people would definitely benefit from this. But there was parts to my story that felt really personal, and I just wasn't sure how comfortable I was with sharing it all, And then at the same time, one of my poems, Tending a Tender Heart, which is included in the book, was accepted to be read on NPR Poetry Sunday. So that sort of something around that time just gave me this insight, this aha bit of time where I was like, oh, maybe I could turn these entries in this marsh experience into a poetry collection where I could choose a little bit of what I wanted
I think
to be included into it.
I've talked to many writers, as you know, and I like the way almost everyone talks about having an idea, writing it up, putting it away, taking it out, and never throwing away anything. And eventually, if it's time appears to you in your brain, and it's a common theme in writing. It happens all the time. So there are many ways we could proceed. You mentioned that this was helped with the healing process. As you know, I personally related to the beauty of the poetry in the natural world. I personally live on bog, and I see swans, and I don't see egrets, I see herons. Occasionally. I see lots of ducks and lots of geese. So one where I'd like you to start, if you would, is read about the springtime.
Okay.
And that is this one, Arrival of Spring.
Okay. So, Arrival of Spring. Sunlight dancing across tops of water look like angel wings ready to take flight. Vocal, red-winged blackbirds eager to return, while daffodils defy our expectation. Like ladies, strong and beautiful, as they poke their pretty little heads out of densely covered growth. A close-knit family of turtles bathes in the warm rays on a slanted rock near water's edge. A heron glides gently, elegant even, across the salt marsh. Everything appears happy out here today. When the warm breeze brushes by, at long last, all I feel is happy too.
Great. Balm for the soul coming in the spring.
I was thinking the time change has been wonderful.
It has. We've gotten out more. And, so would you explain why the word tending has so many interesting meanings?
Sure.
And
I put a definition in the beginning of the book of tend, to tend. Tend is basically, there's two different versions of it in the book, but it's tend to care, means to tend, watch over, or care for. And I feel that sort of over time, it just sort of organically emerged because I felt I had gone through this transition. My kids had grown older. I went through a divorce. I felt over time that the marsh was tending to me in the ways that I had tended to my family. I had tended to my family sort of lovingly day in and day out. And then I found myself at the marsh. The kids went off to college. My youngest daughter's been there consistently the whole time, but things had changed in our, and and as women, as people, as human beings, we tend to so many things. And I started to have this beautiful relationship with the marsh where it gave me something to tend to by watching it and paying attention. Watch how the marsh changes day in and day out, how it can change from the morning walk to the evening walk, or how it can change from the spring to, the poem The Dead of Winter. It really changed a lot over time. So the way, so tending was the watching over, it was a reciprocal relationship. I was watching over the marsh as I felt it was also tending back at me. Yeah.
I thought about the word attend as well, which is the watching. It's the noticing. You're attending to the baby turtles, the egrets, the swan on its nest. Very important meditation in the world of meditation is a walking meditation, and that Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a famous guru, has the mantra, I guess, if you will, is oui merci, yes, thank you, yes, thank you. And your book brought this to my mind, that the walking is a meditation, and attending or tending to the viewing of the minute changes is really what your goal is in any endeavor. It's being in the present moment.
Well, I appreciate that, and I since the book, it's been a couple of years since I originally wrote this down and did that year, and a year since it came out. I can't tell you how rewarding just that practice has become still, of walking, paying attention. I love the practice of meditation, and I love specifically the practice of walking meditation.
Walking meditation, yeah. It's
brings you to the moment.
Very moment, and putting your foot down on the earth and thanking the universe for it is a lovely idea. So, just before we go on too far, Sippawisset Marsh is in Falmouth, and you can see from the Shining Sea bike path.
So it's in West Falmouth. Great Sippawisset Marsh and Little Sippawisset Marsh is part of, you can view it or get to it from the Shining Sea Bikeway in West Falmouth.
Is that part of, like we have in where I live, the Barnstable Land Trust? Is it part of a state preserve?
So right now it's town of Falmouth, but in recent years, 300 Committee has done a lot of work in Falmouth, but the marsh was already part of the town of Falmouth.
Well, can you, I would like you to read a little more. We talked about a few different poems. Let me see what I have marked here that I loved. So many I loved, and so many you were talking. We were talking about All the Way Home, or Walking Through Wisdom Through Wonder.
You can pick it. It's fine. Yes. I like both. I appreciate both of those. But they both, I think, what you were just talking about, the next thought to what you were getting at with the meditation with Thich Nhat Hanh is, for me, is gratitude. That's what it led to. The tending, for me, in the practice, really led to gratitude. And to me, I think those poems to me are good examples of, I don't think I mentioned gratitude, but to me, that's what I think of.
Well, let's hear a little bit more then.
So walking toward wisdom through wonder. The gray clouds feel heavy overhead, and I am out searching for the light. When the birds sing nearby, I wonder, do they ever forget the words to their song? When a walker passes without a hello, I wonder, are they always sullen, or only on this day or towards me? When I notice a break when the light slips in, I wonder, do I run towards it and grab hold of it? I am one who learns the hard way. I can't hold on to something that doesn't want to be held, as it only slips further away.
Very nice.
Thank you.
I'm sure we've all had that experience of all of it, wondering what the birds are really doing when they're singing. Are they singing? Are they communicating? And how? And the red-winged blackbirds are out already, and they're very
I saw
loud.
them the other day. I was so excited. I get excited when I see them because I know the winter is more behind us. Another poem in there good for that, and you can, if you don't have time, it's fine, is the poem The Rain, because I talk in that poem about the birds communicating to each other. They seem to. Or at least I get curious about. I get curious about if they're, how do they communicate to each other?
Would you talk about the heron? you have a heron on the
Yeah.
cover and a little
Sure.
explanation in the book.
Sure.
About
Yeah,
herons.
the herons for me just felt of all the creatures on the marsh, and there's many. You've mentioned a lot of them: the egrets, the ducks. I see turtles, fox. I see all kinds of creatures on the marsh. Over time, I feel like I developed a very strong affinity to the heron. I feel like if I was going through if it was a difficult, complex week or day for whatever reason, everyone has, sometimes they're easier than others. If I saw the heron, I knew that things were going to be okay. It was just comforting to see the heron. And I honestly feel over time that I became familiar with their patterns of coming and going.
Yeah. Well, you've not said something you told me earlier, that they will come up to you.
I have encountered two experiences that are very unusual. There was one day that there are times where I go to the marsh and there's the bike path. There's so many people you just walk, and there's people coming about. But there are also times when I go, because I go very early or very late, where there's not another single soul anywhere. And one time there was a heron landed on the sidewalk of the bike path, literally within really very close, which I called a friend later, and she confirmed that that's not normally typically what they do. And then later on the walk, I had walked about 2 miles down. I again saw the same. I think it was the same heron, because they don't. Could see maybe up to 3 at a time, but it's pretty much you would see 1 at a time. They're pretty solitary for the most part. The same one was at a similar location when I first saw him, just up in the tree, because where I enter the path, it's a very specific spot to get back to my house. And again, that same day, I saw the heron, and I do see them I do see them pretty close. But I look for them, because, like I said, I feel like they remind me that everything's just fine.
Everything's just fine.
Everything's just fine.
The universe is really one in a way. We're all
I know.
part of the same.
I know.
I am a believer that animals have a consciousness that's more similar to ours than we realize. Anyway, as you were describing that experience, I'm thinking about the fact that you are a writing teacher, and I want to invite you to say a little bit more about that, and maybe how you would use that imagery of the heron, if you can think of a way to work that in. But if not, just tell us about Dean College, the Sandwich Arts Alliance, and maybe start with the question I asked you a while ago. What's the difference between teaching younger people and perhaps older people?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question, and I'm going to attempt to discuss it a little. I feel like it's a big question. I feel like I have a lot of good thoughts about it. I really enjoy doing both. I enjoy teaching English composition to freshmen, and I enjoy teaching this class I came up with, Finding Writer Within, for older people. I feel like, for the most part, it's a very different experience, because for English composition, there's a lot of specific goals that I want the students to meet, because they're going from senior in high school with those types of writing expectations, and then college level writing, which it sort of enters in a few different things that they weren't familiar with in high school. So I have to take them through a lot of processes that are a little different than the freer Finding Writer Within class. And I think a lot of times for freshmen, if they're not seeing themselves as writers, wanting to be writers, they can really struggle with it. There can be some resistance. There can be some, it can be some resistance. So what I always do, 2 quick things that I would say about it, because I could talk a lot about it. 2 quick things I would say is I always start with English composition with story, because we all have stories to tell, and we all, it's the easy, it's an easy way to enter into writing if we're telling story. So I always start my comp class with writing story, autobiography or some type, we go through the narrative arc, and but I always just tell them to think of something that they're interested in or care about, or something that happened to them. And for the most part, they always write just these wonderful stories,
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Do you find talent? Do you think you know talent?
With
desire?
Yeah, I think for that particular class, I think what I notice is absolutely see talent. Absolutely. If I had to say only one thing, I would say yes. The longer answer would be, I think at that point it's more willingness, attention to detail, flexibility to move into the different rhetorical strategies that we kind of are expected to cover going into college, because the second semester of that class is a research-based class. So you kind of go far in your writing in a short period of time, from just story to doing research.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's the students who have interest or desire, like you mentioned.
So moving on to the older people, and is it always the course called Finding the Writer Within that you've developed?
That's a class that I came up with a couple of years ago, that I first taught through, actually I very first taught it online through Story Circle Network, an organization out of Texas, but then I offered it through the Falmouth Community School, and then also have offered it through Sandwich Arts Alliance. So I think in all it's been a couple of years now that I've offered it. And it's just something I just have a deep passion for. It comes out of, I'm trying to think of a small version. It's a beautiful, I studied with people in person, Natalie Goldberg, who did Writing Down the Bones, Julia Cameron, The Artist
Finding
Way.
the Artist Within, Artist Way, yeah.
The Artist Way,
Yeah.
and then Writing Down the Bones and The Artist Way. So I have spent weekend-long workshops with them and really embraced and loved their books and works. And that was literally 15 years ago that I did that. And then when I thought, oh, maybe I could also teach in the community, beyond just the comp, teaching to freshman college people, and just give it a try. And it really has.
Well, can you give us a little example of an exercise that you would put people through?
Okay, so I have done day-long intensives, and I've done week-long intensives, and I really enjoy that because I feel like you get a lot, for a week-long. But I often teach it over a 6 weeks time. So the first thing that we do when students come in is I just say, they'll have a journal, they'll have a pen, I'll say, first I want to know why you're here, why you're taking the class, and what goal you have for yourself. So they can connect to why they're here and what they're doing. Then I might do something really simple, like read a small poem. The example I gave you earlier was It Is Born by Pablo Neruda, because it's a very simple poem. It references the water. It's just a wonderful poem. And then I'll ask students to take out their pen at that moment, just not without a lot of worry about what's going to be put on paper, and invite them to just write. But I give them a simple prompt like, I remember what I really mean to say about this is, and I tell them, just give yourself 10 minutes, keep your pen moving across the page, just some very common tools that work well with writing. And that's been very effective.
Are your classes designed for beginners or people who are stuck?
So Finding Writer Within, I feel very strongly, and I've had students of all kinds, are for every type of writer. If you could be a published skilled writer and you just want to start something new, and or you've never thought of yourself as a writer. One student I had last year who said she didn't think she was ever going to take my class because her friend told her that her friend said she laughed and cried in my class and she didn't want to do either. So she thought, I'm not taking it. But she ended up taking it and really enjoyed it. So I think it's for all type. I think it's for the class to me is more for inspiring the creative process. And it's also about community, because when we write alone. And writing is primarily a solitary activity. So if there's a little bit of time, a little window where people can come together and get something, part of their story, on paper and share it with someone else, that's a beautiful thing. And I tell students they don't have to read, but they all do. They all do. They all want to share what's on the paper. And I also put a lot of focus on, at first, we're not critiquing it right away. We're just saying thank you and what we liked about it.
Well,
yes.
You know, we're almost to the end of our time. We have a couple of minutes, and I just did want to. I have some other questions about that writing process and getting that creativity coming and flowing.
Yeah.
But I did want people to know about a couple of things about you. One is that you have this beautiful cookbook that was published a while ago.
Thank you.
Meet Me in My Cape Cod Kitchen. You were a baker at the time, and I gather you're not commercially baking any longer.
I love baking. I was at an event yesterday and I brought the cookies. Baking is my favorite thing.
Okay. And you're also putting your photography into cards and doing some sculpture, and you brought this nice, I know we have a picture of this, which, is this one of your poems on the back?
I don't think it is.
Okay. The white rose serves as a symbol. No, it's about the white rose. So I have enjoyed meeting you.
Thank you, Madeline.
I wanted to mention the exhibit at the West Falmouth Library about the envelope, the Steele envelope.
Yeah, so that was that.
We have a minute to talk about it.
Okay, so there's a sculpture that I have. It's not currently at West Falmouth. It was for a whole month last April. I had 8 pieces of art there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we would like everybody to find Tending the Marsh. I assume it's available. I know I got it at Titcomb's, and it should
I know
be at
8 Cousins
has it.
A lot of stores have it.
And the online vendors will have it. It's a very comfortable read.
Thank you.
Some people sometimes say they don't read poetry. Well, they can read this. They'd like it too.
Thank you.
You'd like it. I want to tell people they'll like it. And you have a website, LindaMariaSteele.com.
Yeah, that's next on my to-do to add to it. It's very simple, but you can find me through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madeline.
It's been delightful getting to know you a little bit.
Thank you.
And,
appreciate that.
Sharing very relatable poetry, and I really do. And I loved it. I loved reading it.
Oh,
thank
you so much.
Thank you so much for
Thanks
coming.
for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. I liked it. I liked it a lot, I hope. Yeah.